Welcome to the Psychology of Us, the podcast where we explore the forces that shape human behavior, the unseen dynamics of our thoughts, emotions, and social interactions. I'm Professor RJ Starr, and today I want to talk about something that many of us have witnessed, some of us have experienced, and if we're being honest, nearly all of us have participated in at some point in our lives: mockery. More specifically, why some people take pleasure in the distress of others.
Hello and welcome to the Psychology of Us with Professor RJ Starr, where we explore the mind's influence on life, relationships, and society. RJ Starr is an existential psychologist, professor, and author dedicated to exploring the core challenges of human existence, how we find meaning, embrace responsibility, and navigate life's challenges. Known for a thought-provoking yet accessible approach, RJ inspires listeners to cultivate self-awareness, emotional intelligence, authenticity, and purpose. This podcast is designed for all psychology enthusiasts, practitioners, students, and anyone curious about why we think, feel, and behave the way we do. Each episode unpacks theories, explores complex questions, and offers insights that deepen understanding of the human experience. So settle in, stay curious, and discover the psychology of us.
Imagine this. A man sits alone at a bar, watching the final seconds of a championship game slip away. His team, the one he has followed for years, loses in a crushing defeat. He covers his face with his hands, disappointment settling in. From a few stools away, laughter erupts. A group of rival fans, people who have no personal stake in the game beyond their allegiance to a different jersey, point at him, mocking his reaction. They revel in his misery, not merely satisfied with their team's victory, but entertained by his distress. In another setting, a woman tears up during a televised political event. A candidate she believed in, one whose policies she felt would directly improve her life, has just conceded the race. Her reaction is captured on camera, and within hours, the image spreads across social media. Strangers flood the comments, ridiculing her emotions, turning her grief into a meme. They mock not just her disappointment, but her very capacity to care. We see these moments all the time. Someone's sorrow, someone's vulnerability, turned into entertainment. Why does this happen? Why do some people find joy in the misfortune of others? What is it about witnessing distress that compels them to mock rather than empathize? At first glance, it might seem like just another aspect of human nature. We might tell ourselves that this is how people are, that mockery is just part of life, part of sports, part of politics, part of social interaction. But psychology tells a more complex story. There are reasons why some people are drawn to mockery, why they feel compelled to taunt, why they experience what the Germans call Schadenfreude, pleasure at another's misfortune. It's more than simple amusement. It often reveals something deeper about the mocker: insecurity, a desire for dominance, a lack of emotional intelligence, or even an inability to sit with their own discomfort. Mockery isn't new. It's a behavior that echoes from childhood playgrounds, where bullies sneer at the child who stumbles, the one who cries, the one who dares to show vulnerability. But when this behavior extends into adulthood, when it manifests in political discourse, sports culture, and even personal relationships, it raises serious psychological questions. So, let's take a closer look at why mockery exists, what it says about the people who engage in it, and what, if anything, can be done to curb this impulse. First, we have to acknowledge that mockery serves a function. It isn't random. It isn't meaningless. People engage in it because they get something from it. For some, mockery provides a fleeting sense of superiority. When they ridicule someone for feeling deeply about something, they place themselves above that person, at least in their own minds. They are the rational ones, the tough ones, the ones who wouldn't get so worked up over something so trivial. Or at least that's what they tell themselves. This is where we see a psychological phenomenon known as illusory superiority. It's a cognitive bias in which people overestimate their own intelligence, emotional control, or rationality compared to others. The people who mock others' reactions often believe they would never behave the same way. They convince themselves that they are above such emotional responses. But research suggests otherwise. Studies on emotional regulation have repeatedly shown that people are poor predictors of their own reactions to emotional events. Many believe they would remain calm in distressing situations, only to find themselves overwhelmed when faced with real emotional stakes. The same individuals who laugh at the fan crying over a sports loss might find themselves devastated when their own team falls short. The person who mocks another's political despair might feel the same anguish if the tables were turned. But in the moment, they don't see the common humanity. They see an opportunity to affirm their own sense of control at someone else's expense. Now, another major reason people engage in mockery is group reinforcement. People rarely mock in isolation. More often than not, they do it in front of an audience, in a social context that rewards their behavior. In social psychology, we talk about in-group and out-group dynamics. When people ridicule those from an opposing political party, rival sports team, or ideological camp, they are not just expressing amusement, they are reinforcing their own sense of belonging. Mockery, in this sense, serves as a bonding mechanism. It strengthens the identity of the group by contrasting it with the emotions of the other side. We see this in sports culture, where the joy of victory is often accompanied by the visible disappointment of the other team's fans. We see it in politics, where the grief of the losing side is met not with reflection, but with taunts and memes. We see it in online spaces, where a single moment of someone's sadness or outrage can be captured, stripped of context, and turned into viral entertainment. And speaking of online spaces, we cannot ignore the role of digital disinhibition. The internet provides an ideal environment for mockery to flourish. Anonymity and physical distance make it easier for people to ridicule others without confronting the real emotional consequences of their actions. When someone leaves a cruel comment or shares a meme mocking a stranger, they don't see the person's face, they don't see their reaction, they don't have to deal with the discomfort of witnessing real human pain. And when cruelty is rewarded with likes, shares, and engagement, it reinforces the behavior, making it more socially acceptable. The more we engage in it, the more we normalize it. But here's the thing, mockery isn't harmless. People who habitually mock others often believe they are demonstrating strength. They see themselves as clever, as emotionally resilient, as having an ability to tell it like it is without getting bogged down in sentimentality. But this perception is a distortion, one that masks a deeper psychological reality. Mockery is not an expression of strength. It is an avoidance of vulnerability, a defense mechanism that allows the mocker to sidestep their own discomfort with emotional expression. At the core of mockery lies an inability or an unwillingness to engage with emotions in a healthy, constructive way. True strength is found in emotional intelligence, the capacity to recognize, understand, and regulate emotions, both in oneself and in others. People with high emotional intelligence can acknowledge another person's distress without feeling the need to diminish it. They can empathize without feeling threatened by emotions that differ from their own. But those who engage in habitual mockery tend to struggle with this. Their reactions to emotional expression, whether it be sadness, frustration, or disappointment, are not based on thoughtful reflection, but on reflexive dismissal. Rather than sit with the discomfort of another person's pain, they externalize their own unease by ridiculing it. This pattern is often rooted in early socialization. Many people who grow into habitual mockers were raised in environments where vulnerability was treated as a liability rather than a fundamental human experience. They may have been taught that toughness means suppressing emotions, that stoicism is the only acceptable response to difficulty, or that showing empathy is a sign of weakness. In such cases, mockery becomes a learned behavior, a means of reinforcing their own emotional detachment while devaluing the emotions of others. If they grew up in a household where emotions were met with ridicule, where sadness was mocked and fear was belittled, they may have internalized the idea that the only way to avoid being ridiculed themselves was to join in the ridicule of others. Others develop a tendency toward mockery as a response to their own insecurities. The act of mocking someone else's distress allows them to create a false sense of superiority. By positioning themselves as above emotional reactions, they can maintain the illusion that they are in control, even when, in reality, their mockery is a sign of deep emotional avoidance. Psychologists have long studied the phenomenon of illusory superiority, in which individuals overestimate their own abilities, intelligence, or emotional strength. Mockers often fall into this category. They believe they are more rational, more composed, less prone to overreaction than the people they mock. But studies on emotional regulation suggest that this belief is often an illusion. Given the right circumstances, nearly everyone experiences deep emotions. The difference is that those with emotional intelligence know how to process those emotions, while habitual mockers only know how to suppress or deflect them. Over time, habitual mockery erodes a person's capacity for emotional depth. The more they engage in ridicule, the more they reinforce a pattern of detachment from genuine human experiences. They become desensitized, not just to the emotions of others, but to their own. A person who frequently mocks sadness may find that they struggle to process their own grief when they eventually face loss. Someone who ridicules others for expressing fear may find themselves ill-equipped to handle their own anxieties when confronted with real challenges. This detachment can lead to what psychologists refer to as alexithymia, a condition characterized by difficulty identifying and expressing emotions. Over time, individuals who rely on mockery as a coping mechanism may find themselves emotionally stunted, unable to form meaningful connections because they have spent so long dismissing the very emotions that make connection possible. This emotional disconnection has real consequences. Studies in psychology have consistently shown that individuals who regularly engage in aggressive humor and ridicule tend to score lower in emotional intelligence. They struggle to recognize emotions in others, often misinterpreting genuine distress as overreaction or weakness. They have difficulty maintaining meaningful relationships, as their interactions are built on dismissiveness rather than understanding. And perhaps most tellingly, they often experience an internal sense of isolation, even if they don't recognize it. Because mockery distances them from emotional connection, they may go through life feeling vaguely disconnected from others, unable to fully engage in the rich emotional landscape that defines human experience. The irony is that habitual mockers often view themselves as emotionally strong, when in reality they are among the most emotionally fragile. It takes far more strength to sit with discomfort, to acknowledge another person's distress without diminishing it, to engage in conversations that require emotional depth and nuance. But for those who have spent a lifetime mocking emotions rather than understanding them, this kind of engagement feels foreign, even threatening. Instead, they continue to use mockery as a shield, as a way to keep emotions at arm's length. But the longer they do, the more they cut themselves off from the very thing they need most: the ability to connect, to feel, to experience life in its full emotional depth. So, what's the alternative? Mockery is often mistaken for power, for control, for superiority. But in reality, it reveals something much different. It is not a sign of strength. It is a defense mechanism, an avoidance of vulnerability, a refusal to engage with the complexities of human emotion. Those who habitually mock others may believe they are asserting dominance, but what they are truly doing is shielding themselves from the discomfort of empathy, from the work of self-awareness, from the emotional depth that real human connection requires. But here's the thing: mockery does not go unnoticed. It shapes how people perceive us. It defines the relationships we are capable of forming, and it dictates the emotional landscape of the world we inhabit. A person who builds their identity on belittling others will, over time, find themselves surrounded by those who do the same. And when the day comes that they are the ones in distress, the ones facing disappointment or grief, they may find that the same culture of ridicule they helped create has no kindness to offer them in return. So the question is not simply why people mock, it is whether we are willing to break that cycle, whether we are willing to look at our own responses to vulnerability our own discomfort with emotion, and challenge the instinct to dismiss what we do not understand. Because in the end, mockery does not elevate us. It isolates us. It erodes our capacity for connection, for growth, for genuine emotional resilience. Strength is not found in tearing others down. It is found in the ability to sit with discomfort, to recognize humanity in those we disagree with, to allow for the reality that emotions, whether we share them or not, are real and they matter. Every moment of mockery is a choice, just as every moment of empathy is. The only question is, what kind of person do we choose to be?
That wraps up this episode of The Psychology of Us with Professor RJ Starr. Each conversation is a step toward greater understanding of ourselves, each other, and the forces that shape human behavior. Listeners are invited to continue the conversation by sharing their thoughts, questions, and topic suggestions at profrjstarr@outlook.com. Every message helps shape future episodes, ensuring the discussions remain relevant, thought-provoking, and meaningful. For those who find value in these explorations, subscribing and leaving a review is a great way to support the podcast and bring these insights to a wider audience. Until next time, stay curious, stay thoughtful, and keep exploring the psychology of us.